Hi, this is John Ondo from Marketing Media and Cupcakes. And before we get into today's episode, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. We're back after being gone for over 4.5 years. And I hope you get a chance to listen to episode 77, where we explain why we were gone for so long and that we're back for at least 3 more episodes. Angel and I are big supporters of entrepreneurship, and we love small businesses and faith-based businesses. And we just want to encourage you through our podcast each week. What's going to determine if we continue with more episodes will be the response. Subscribe to us on your platform. Send us an email at john@ondomedia.com. That would help us know you're listening and you want more episodes. So thank you so much, and let's get into today's episode. You were Catholic more than I was Catholic. What is it when you go to a confessional? Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
So we're going to have
so many days since my last confession.
We're going to have a podcast confessional here.
Ooh.
This is the small business podcast that is sweeter than all the rest. Marketing, media, and cupcakes.
Well, hello. We're a podcast for small business, big business, any kind of business, really. My name is John Ondo. I'm a filmmaker. Along with me is my wife, Angel.
Hi there.
She is a customer service pro. She trains people, and then on top of all the things in her regular job, she has a cupcake business. How is the cupcake business going, by the way?
You know, since the lovely COVID, it kind of slowed down. And then we've got some graduation orders coming back because they're having
graduations in August.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're having a few things, but nothing outrageous, nothing I can't handle.
It was not a year of growth so far in 2020.
Not in comparison to last year, where I overcommitted and almost killed myself. So this year it's been very, very doable. No orders on top of each other. No 4 people picking up on the same day.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people are dealing with that. Today, we want to talk about a couple different topics, but one of the bigger ones is talking about how do you recover after a mistake or maybe a bad strategy. We all make mistakes, and actually, we're going to share something that I did that probably, I don't think it was a bad idea. It just didn't quite go right, so we had to punt and make a change.
As you like to call it, a course correction.
Yeah, or a punt. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going football references.
Well, that's me.
Versus plain references.
You remember football, don't you? It used to be a game we used to watch.
Don't know if we'll get to it all this year.
I don't know at all either. So and that's a whole other thing. I was talking with one of our other podcast clients who have inside connections in college football a little bit more than the NFL, but they had some in the NFL too. And we were talking. I won't reveal the source or anything. But
do not.
They are very convinced that there will not be a college football season this year.
Wow.
At least that's their prediction. They hope to be wrong.
Yeah, I hope they're wrong.
But we've talked a couple times, and we think what's going to happen is they're going to look at Major League Baseball's restarting.
Yep.
And the big concern is if you see a bunch of COVID spikes, when that happens, then probably everybody else is going to say, nah, we can't do this. And as we all know, what really controls the world is insurance companies saying, nah, you can't do that.
Yeah.
So because once a coach or someone major, God forbid, dies or gets seriously ill, nobody's going to want to risk that anymore. Even and we're talking about without the crowds. To me, it's already a given. There will be no attendees to any football or basketball games for the near future. So this was a question that my friends asked me, and I was saying, why do you think that America's having all this trouble with? Apparently, third world countries, other places dealing with COVID aren't having a big issue with, all the pushback and everything else that we're having here in the United States. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know that you want to put this in a podcast on what
sure
my thoughts
I do. That's
are.
The point of a podcast is to be off the record and
I
kind
think,
of crazy.
First of all, the United States, in comparison to most countries, are filled with spoiled brats. And
Yes.
I would have to say we are accustomed to having our way the way we want it and be damned with everybody else regardless, which is why people want to come to America. That's why people want to come here, is because you can do whatever you want.
You can protest.
Well, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah,
you have freedom. That's the whole point.
It is freedom.
The freedom that we have been given has created the problem that we have, which is people feel that their freedoms are being infringed upon by those things. Other people feel that you're not being, a good citizen if you're not on the other side of whatever. So you have this constant conflict. And then you throw in a political election, you throw in other things that are going on. It's just a perfect storm.
And to make you feel good, that's almost exactly what I said to them. I think all of that, like you mentioned, is a perfect storm for what we've got going on with that. So well done.
Well, thank you.
You were Catholic more than I was Catholic. What is it when you go to a confessional? Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned.
So we're going to have
so many days since my last confession.
We're going to have a podcast confessional here. If we could.
I'm going to close the Ziploc door.
It's a Ziploc? Is that how that works?
Well, that's what Kathleen Madigan calls it. It's a Ziploc door.
Of course she would. I love Kathleen Madigan. For those of you who've listened to us for a while, you've heard me talk about Premier Podcast, and that's our podcast production company. And my big company, which is me,
Let's not belittle what we do.
The big skyscraper in the middle of Westerville, Ohio here is Ondo Media, and it's been around for 10 years, and we've got awards and things, and Columbus Business First is honored us with one of the top 25 companies, and blah blah blah. So Ondo Media has been around for a long time, but we wanted to start launching a podcast company. We were already
podcast production.
Yeah, podcast production company. And we had already been doing podcast production under Ondo Media, but I just felt like we needed to brand a different company underneath the umbrella of Ondo Media. So we began Premier Podcast. We started thinking about it last fall and then launched it in January 1st of the beautiful, wonderful year 2020.
Maybe hindsight, and as they say, hindsight is always 2020.
Now, before you start going down the road and say, what happened? Did you guys end up in jail, or did something happen terrible? Because everybody expects a big juicy,
wow.
There was a big scandal that we were drug into. No, it was nothing that bad.
Funny.
Actually, Premier Podcast still exists. It just exists under Ondo Media again. So we made a branding error or a branding misjudgment.
Yeah.
And, typically on these type of problems, you sit back and say, well, I'm not going to tell anybody about that. But no, we're going to use this as a teaching opportunity. I do this often when I'm teaching video production and different things. And we've often heard the quote. It was in my favorite Pixar book. It has a story about the $10,000 mistake some new employee made, and he gets called into the CEO's office, and he's like, well, you're going to fire me now. He says, no, I just spent $10,000 to train you, so no, I'm not firing you. Yeah. So it's a teaching opportunity. So we don't have Premier Podcast anymore. It's still there. It's Ondo Media. We still have a podcast production company, but we decided to change, to put the brand back under Ondo Media. So I'm going to walk you through why we did that, and typically, I don't have a problem because explaining mistakes, because I think we all learn from them. Mm-hmm. So basically, the concept why we wanted to start Premier Podcast as a separate brand, we felt there was a really, really big market. We still believe there is a really big market, and we would do better marketing that under a different brand name than Ondo Media, which is the parent company. So I went one day, and I remember texting you, trying to find, and this is how I often do things, and it may have been a mistake this time, trying to find a name for the company based on the website, which makes total sense. Did the domain search. We found Premier Podcast as a domain that was available. We couldn't get world class, or I'm very big into not having long website names. So the best we could do, we came across, and I was surprised it was open, Premier Podcast. So we picked up premierpodcast.com as the domain and made the logos. And I said, I'm so excited, Premier Podcast. This is a nice name because it sounds like Hollywood. It's Premier, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Premier is spelled two ways.
That's where you get got.
And what's funny is, for me, Premier is always spelled with the extra E, because I use Adobe Premiere, which is spelled with the extra E in editing and so forth and so on. But obviously, there is another Premiere that's commonly used without the extra E, which is also the same Premiere that's used for I think it's the Premier Soccer League in Europe. And
so is it a French spelling versus an American spelling?
It's funny. It's one of those tomato
like
things.
Theater.
Yeah,
with
the E and not the E. So that was the first thing. Was I didn't fully research the options of the other E, because I'm like, I never used the other E. I should have run it by some more people, which is always a good thing. So
mistake number one, or
mistake number one was I did not fully research the name and the domain.
Okay, so learn from us, friends.
Yes.
Number one. Do your research.
Yeah, so that was the first issue we had. So we had the domain, we built a beautiful website, but the problem we kept running into is other folks that I knew when we launched it and we started putting, hey, follow our new podcast production company, people would keep saying to us, where's your podcast at? Now, I interpreted that to mean the podcast for the production company, which I did have one for that company. It was called the Podcast Evangelist. And it was a fun little podcast, and a lot of people told me, we really love that name you have for your podcast, the Podcast Evangelist. But despite that going, we began to get the questions, where's the podcast? What? Tell me about that. And began to realize that the second error was, despite the fact that Premier Podcast was a podcast production company, because the name was Premier Podcast, people just thought it was a podcast.
Yes.
And again, this is perception, and this is something that I preach about all the time. You've probably heard me on the show in the earlier episodes say, run it by other people. Now, I did. I ran it by people, and they thought that's a great idea. Because I work with a lot of podcast and a lot of broadcast people, they naturally assumed it was a podcast production company. So when it got more into the general public, we began to realize they just thought it was a podcast. So that was error number 2, was I didn't fully go through and really show everybody what it was. I got positive feedback, which sometimes you will get. You know how people, it's like when you show your parents a picture, hey, look, Mommy, oh, that's beautiful. I got a lot of that, I think, where it was people like, oh, hey, look at our new company. Oh, that's beautiful. We don't know what it is. But they told me it was good, and I just took that feedback as gospel, and it wasn't. So the second error was that people didn't understand the target demo, which was people who don't know podcasting, which is really who we were trying to talk to, thought it was a podcast. That was strike number 2. So, and the third thing then we began to realize very quickly was the fact that we also shared a name with Premier Podcast without the E, which was a soccer league podcast.
Oh.
So one day I went in, as I always do with my websites, and I Googled Premier Podcast, and all that came up was Adobe Premiere, Premier Soccer League, and that's when I realized, even though I knew Adobe Premiere would be there, I didn't think when you would type in Premier Podcast, Adobe Premiere would show up, because Adobe Premiere is a video editing program. It has nothing to do with podcasts. So I began to realize very quickly, we can't get SEO on this. We are never going to be somewhere where if somebody types in Premier Podcast, we're even going to show up. Even if you type in the name correctly, it comes up as something else. So that was one of the big major red flags with the name that I completely just overlooked. I didn't think it would be a problem. I had used Ondo Media for years. I've done other website SEO. It's never been an issue, but these are big leagues, literally Major League Soccer and Adobe Premiere, and there was no way we were going to get that. So that was a big red flag right off the bat that I began to realize we aren't going to be able to use this domain name. And then the final thing that convinced me we were going to have to make a change was I was talking to the folks that are consulting us now with SEO and local search. Rev Local, great place here in Columbus, Ohio. And I was going over and said, here's what I'm dealing with right now, and I'm thinking about a brand change. And he did a quick search on some things and came back to me and said, listen, here's your other issue on top of all the other ones you've mentioned you didn't notice. The fact because you have Ondo Media under an address and you have Premier Podcast under the same address, Google sees that as possibly fraudulent and is dinging your SEO. So we changed the physical address of Ondo Media from one location to another in Columbus, and then we launched another podcast company under Ondo Media, same address, same phone number. Google saw that as, well, that company's obviously been hacked, it's out of business, something's going wrong here, and they give you a ding. So basically about everything you could do wrong to launch a second brand, I did. And I share that with you, not for you to sit back and say, well, you're an idiot. I already know that. But it's the point is, even me, I've been doing this for a while. I've been doing media and marketing. I've been doing stuff for other folks. We still make mistakes, and we still, on top of it, with the 2020 COVID thing and everything else, there are still mistakes to be had. But here's what I want you to look at. If you've got a small business and maybe you've built it last year or launched it and you're seeing problems, dig deeper than just the initial, well, nobody likes me and the company's going downhill. You may have several problems that are killing your brand that you don't know about. My brand positioning for Premier Podcast, I think, was great. We were making adjustments. I had bought other domains, Premier Podcast Production, longer domains I wasn't really hot on, but we were doing things to try to correct it. But the ultimate problem, and this is what happens so often in my consulting world. I was brought into a great church recently that we're consulting, and the leadership there was kind of like, we need you to fix what's the problem here. And I said, this is what always happens. You don't have one or two big problems. You have like 10 to 15 small problems that are all nipping at you like, gnats or something. Mm-hmm. And this is what was going on with Premier Podcasting. We had a nice name, but it was the wrong name. You didn't know that because we didn't realize we were competing with other names with the name Premier in the domain that we can't compete against. We didn't realize that when we created this new brand, that by putting new websites up and at the same time, let's change the address because I wanted to move our P.O. box to a different box that was closer to the house. By doing that, Google was going to ding us because we're moving the address for the first time in 10 years and then putting the new brand under the same address. So there was several issues. And then along the line, people we work with on the show, Brittany Dixon and others, when I was telling them what we were going through, and they said the same thing. They said, well, why did you want to put the brand under, take it out from under Ondo Media and make it separate? I said, well, I think it'll be better for SEO. And she's like, no, Ondo Media is a great brand. You guys are doing good work. Keep it under Ondo Media. So again, it was one of those situations where I thought it would be better if I traded, Premier Podcast under a separate identity, that it would be better for it, when in fact, the very thing that we were sitting on, Ondo Media, is a much more recognizable. It's 10 years. It's got awards. And after I sat back and took a good long look at this, I thought, yeah, this was a bad idea. So damage done, not much. We have clients. We're doing fine, and it's, for the most part, not a lot of damage done. I did think it was critical. I needed to make the change right away. So, literally, this was a 6-month thing where we had this thing called Premier Podcast, and we have rolled it back under Ondo Media, and we're still doing work. As a matter of fact, we're picking up more work now, which is the whole goal. It was just a brand mistake of doing it and not researching it fully. So again, if you have started a business and it's not quite taking off, obviously COVID might be a big issue. You don't know that. You may have a domain issue. You may have a perception issue, which we had. Again, really do your research on that. And again, these are lessons learned that I knew that I still made the mistake on, because I kind of thought, oh, you know what, I've done enough. This is good in my experience. So don't let experience also fool you. Were you surprised when I had to tell you that I think we've got a problem here? We're going to have to pull the brand.
You had expressed frustration from the beginning. Unfortunately, right at the time you chose to do this was when COVID decided to go crazy. So that made sense. When you started explaining some of the errors that you were finding with, I just talked to this person and now they're saying because I have these things at the same, different names, the same address, that's a problem. Same phone number, that's a problem. And I was like, wow, I wouldn't have thought that would be a problem. Yeah. Now in my brain, it's only a problem in my world with what I do full time when I see, okay, well, who is at this address? When I'm doing the stuff I do, I have 3 different names. Yeah. So who really is there? Have they been bought? Have they changed? Different things of that nature. So, but again, I just didn't think because it was a P.O. box, not a physical address, what would that matter? So there was some things that you continually kept coming back to with, this is a mistake or this is not working, and then the big one was when you found out that it was dinging your Ondo Media SEO.
Yeah.
That was a concern because that's where, quite frankly, your bread and butter comes from.
And we had dropped. We had always been a front page, above the fold SEO.
So that was a concern that you were not getting. And to me, again, this was something you wanted to keep it separate because you felt it wasn't video production, so it was separate. Yeah. And to me, it felt like it was all related. But I'm not gonna tell you no because I don't know anything about it. But I am from a training perspective, and will always say, you learn the most from every mistake you make. So when I tell people, don't worry about making a mistake, and they're like, I don't want to mess up. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but you're going to learn more from that one mistake you make than you will ever learn from the 10 to 20 hours you spend with me. I made a mistake not too long ago that I just wanted to crawl under a bus, and I've been doing this stuff for over 20 some years. So I will never do it again, but it happened. Yeah. So mistakes to me are not, as long as no one dies and you don't lose millions of dollars.
Of the story. They're in the movie, they are the midpoint when you have a mistake, and then the hero has to recover.
Yes.
And I want to be careful for those of you who are listening to this and thinking, "Oh my gosh, I have a brand problem. I've been thinking about changing my brand." And please be careful. This is not something you can do suddenly. But the reason we put Premier Podcast under Ondo Media and just changed it to Ondo Media was because it's only been 6 months. Quite frankly, we do not have, with the COVID crisis and everything else going on, we picked up some clients, but not enough to make it a big deal to change it.
So if you're somebody who currently does, I'll use me. I'm supposed to only do cupcakes. My name is Angel's Custom Cupcakes, and yet I get more requests lately and in the last 12 to 15 months for physical cakes. I'm not going to change the name, although I've joked about it. I'm not going to have a new name now that's Angel's Custom Cakes that goes under Angel's Custom Cupcakes because, again, there's no point. So to me, it's all cake, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So I think that's what John's learning is that all that he does kind of, you can, as much as it in some ways doesn't make sense, you're like, you know what, it all falls into the same bucket. It's all production. Whether it be video, whether it be audio, whether it be podcast, whether it be whatever, it all makes sense. So it can live under Ondo Media without any trauma.
If the product you're making is good and it is well received, like your cupcakes, don't think, well, my business sucks and I need to just stop it. No, it could be you need to rebrand it. It could be that you've got a website issue. You've got a competitor that's got a similar name in a different market. And if people can't search you and find you quickly, that's a problem. And so look at all the issues. And again, this is where people like myself and others are a consultant. The problem with me with Premier Podcast is I needed someone to look at my situation as I do with my clients. I'm the third eye that can look at things and say, oh yeah, I can see this clearly now in 10 seconds. But because this was my project and my production and my company, I was too close to it. And I used the same eyes I use for my clients. But because I was too close to it, I misread some obvious things. I should have gone to some friends of mine and said, hey, what do you think about this? And I think they would have been honest and said, not real sure if people are getting the fact that you're a podcast production company. Oh, and by the way, did you do this with your domains? And by the way, it's COVID. Why don't you hold off on launching it?
Again, we didn't know COVID was coming.
So anyway, I hope this was helpful to you. And again, we are here to help. And that's the point of our podcast. We like to be transparent. If you have questions, john@ondomedia.com. If you have a story you want to tell, we'd love to have you on the podcast. And let us know if you want to share something. You want to find out more about our podcast production company, which is under Ondo Media, our video production company. That's ondomedia.com, as well as Angel's Custom Cupcakes if you're in the Central Ohio area and you want the best cupcakes ever made. You want angelscustomcupcakes.com. So until next time, thanks for living the dream.
Connect with John and Angel via Facebook and Instagram and let us know your thoughts. Marketing, Media, and Cupcakes is a production of Ondo Media.